everybody, I'm here with Jerry and Cheri Kelly in East Hampton. They're backyard homesteaders, and they have agreed to meet with me today to talk about what they're doing in their yard. So thanks for doing that, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem.
So just want to jump right into the questions that we have for you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and what inspired you to start your backyard homesteading?
We have 3 kids, and we wanted them to know where their food came from, and also help with food costs. So that's the basic idea. Jerry grew up in Oklahoma, so has a lot more experience with gardening. He had about 10 acres of the house that he grew up on.
Yes.
And
Cattle, pigs,
Yeah.
horses, chickens. Just gardening was just big family of boys, big eaters, as you can obviously know. Gardening was just something we did.
we grew up in East Hartford, which was more suburban and didn't have the space like we do out here, but we always had a little garden. And I always liked doing it, but I wasn't particularly green-thumbed, so he's teaching me a lot as we do this.
Very cool. Before you moved out here to East Hampton, you lived in an apartment. How was your experience different or similar to what you're doing now when you lived in the apartment?
Mainly container gardening. Since you don't own the land, or if the landlord isn't really keen on you doing some in-ground gardening. The apartment we had prior to here in East Hampton was in Rockfall, and we did have a great landlord who allowed us to use part of the front yard that was sunny. I was able to do some experimentation in gardening techniques, but mostly container gardening worked well there because there was no foliage in the parking area, and we had a large parking lot, so I was able to grow things there nicely.
Yeah, and we made the bags out of the landscape cloth. So I sewed like 75 or something of those bags that, and we had a ridiculous amount of tomato plants. And then when we moved in here, we still did them over in the second driveway, but over the years we've built up the garden into a more permanent structure.
And you did those bags because it saved you money to sell them yourself? Or?
Yeah.
Well, that, and you could control the soil, and part of the experimentation was to see what would grow in, what would not grow in. As a science teacher, I know you'll ask that later. Experimenting with horticulture, agriculture has always been something I've done since I was a kid, and I bring that into the classroom to help students understand that you can, in a limited space, even if you live in a city, grow something on your back step or stoop in small containers, and you can be quite productive.
Yeah, we had a very good production. I mean, we had a massive amount of tomatoes, and
peppers, peas,
in a
cucumbers,
small area too. So.
When you started doing this garden, what was the first priority?
Planning it out carefully, and then soil, since they're raised beds, carefully considering placement and soil depth, as well as preventing critters from coming in. So planning was the first thing, and then assembly, preparing the raised beds and for the plants themselves.
You place the beds in the front yard. Can you tell me a little about why you chose the front yard to do your gardening?
Mainly, it's sunny. It's a space that isn't really utilized by the young ones or children, but it's also close to the road, so I didn't want the kids to play too much in the front yard. But to be quite frank and honest, access to water. Our water spigot is on the front side of the house. So even though I do have some hoses run to the back, it's far more convenient to have the hose right up here in front, so when I water in the morning.
Yeah, and we wanted to make it, we wanted to do some landscaping up in the front, and we just figured this is a way to make it be functional and have our garden, but also be beautiful. So that was part of the planning process. Is I drew out the plans and what we wanted to do, and we had to change some things as we were actually building it, but we wanted it to be functional but beautiful at the same time. And I feel like because it is in the front, it kind of starts the conversation for people, when they're walking by or driving by. Like, people do notice it and they do stop and ask.
I hadn't thought of that. It was only after the fact.
Yeah.
And I knew a lot of neighbors were watching us as we were assembling this, not sure what we were doing as we were putting the boxes in. Only until they saw the full picture then they realized, and now it has really caused a lot of people as they go on their walks, whether the evening or in the morning, to stop and talk. So we've met quite a few more of our neighbors, and we've inspired a couple other neighbors to start doing something similar to this, maybe not in their front yard, but it's just something fun to do, and it's something anyone can do, and you can talk about it.
Yeah.
So you've had some good feedback from your neighbors on this.
Yeah.
99% good feedback. I'll leave the 1% around. Pun intended.
You have a great space here. Do you spend time with your family just kind of relaxing in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The kids, come out, and we incorporated a sandbox that we'll show you later into the garden bed so that the little one can play there while we're taking care of what needs to be done in the garden, and also, just at any time. But
they like to come out and help harvest. Willow likes to come out and help water from time to time. They like to see what I'm finding, and insects. If there's new interesting insects, I let the boys know, and obviously they come running out to take a look. Some of them obviously are pests, and I'm doing my best to get rid of them in an organic way, but it can be challenging.
yeah, but there's, we put the bench in, and the kids, and us, we'll sit on the bench. I like to have coffee out here. It's like my favorite spot. But it definitely plays a part. We use this a lot. Like, we're out here a lot. We have parties out here. It's...
So instead of the raucous play of children, it's more of a relaxing, it'd kind of be kitschy to say contemplative, but when everything's done and you can sit and relax, you can do that. You can just sit back and look at the plants, look at the organisms, at the birds that are flying in, the dragonflies that are buzzing by. Right now we've got quite a few gypsy moths. I don't want them, but still, you just get to see nature in an up close, kind of manageable, knowing that the kids are going to be safe.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about how the kids are involved with the process of watering and sometimes helping to harvest food. Cheri, have you noticed any changes in the family as a result of the process that you've got going on here? Did they ever try anything new just because they contributed to gardening it or
Yeah.
enjoying it?
I think that they are more apt to try some of the foods because they grew it. They think it's kind of cool that, it came from seeds that we put in ourselves. They're pretty good about eating better than most kids, but are still kind of picky about certain vegetables. But we eat kale a lot because we grow a lot of it. And, they were not so excited about that initially, but they did try it, and they do open up to more things. But this year we tried to plant some things that specifically we know that they would eat. During the planting process, we're like, okay, they'll eat cucumbers, we know that. They'll eat tomatoes, we know that, So we built it up so that they have foods that they're going to eat, that's the whole point.
Sure.
So, but yeah, they definitely will try. Oh, this is a radish. Jared pulled a radish out the other day for them to try. And I don't think if I brought that home from the store that they would have been so open to it. It's different coming out from our dirt, here.
Are there any favorites?
I think that the kids like the cucumbers the most.
Mm-hmm.
I like the squashes. We did the patty pan squashes, and they can be prepared in a lot of ways. We had them pickled last year, and so not by us, but we wanted to pickle them ourselves. They were just really, really good. So we were going to try that this year. I can't wait. I hope we have good pumpkins. That's like my favorite, not necessarily to eat, but just I like the idea of growing pumpkins. And we will.
Watermelon's my favorite, but also the cucumbers, pickling. I love to can stuff, so I'm experimenting with a few different new recipes. But I'd say probably cucumbers and tomatoes.
Tomatoes are definitely
Cherokee
my favorite.
Purples,
The
Brandywine, the heirloom tomatoes. Those are my favorites. Cherry tomatoes, I love those too, and then the lettuces. It's hard to really pick for me one particular favorite. There's lots of basics that people can grow that tried and true, trust that you're going to get a decent harvest, and then I like to sprinkle in stuff that's different just to say, hey, what is this? I know my brother recently got stationed for a long deployment in Korea. He and his wife, they sent me some packets of seeds, which were quite entertaining because it was all in Korea. Meaning Korean, there was no English on the packet at all. So I had no idea other than the picture. And so I know one looks like a zucchini and the other looks like a cucumber. We're growing them both and we'll try them. I'm game.
Yeah. My favorite, I think, there's nothing like a fresh, right from the garden tomato. Like, they do not taste the same as store-bought tomatoes at all. Like, they smell different. They're brighter color, and just to slice those up and put them even just like on bread with, mozzarella and basil. It's like, that's my favorite. You cannot beat that.
No, I can't. Great. Store-bought.
And the fresh herbs
even
too.
Organic store-bought tomatoes are not as good for some reason as like
the fresh herbs.
Yeah.
That's a good bonus too.
Oh yeah, we use that like in everything. As soon as they start coming up, like I'm like, oh, I'll just go out and pick what we're having for dinner. Like once things really start coming in, it's like I come out with a bowl every night and I'm like, this is ready, so I guess we're eating this. This is ready, and you just make up a meal right from the front yard, which I love doing that.
Jerry, you mentioned you're a teacher, a high school teacher. Can you talk a little bit about how farming and gardening can be incorporated into education?
Mainly as a science teacher, showing students that experimental processes can be fun, even though gardening can be a long-term experimental process because you vary it from year to year. But by bringing it in the classroom, you can test soil, you can test and learn about what pH is, how to raise and lower it. You can learn about insects, those that are pests, those that are invasive, to include plants and ways in which to control it. You can cross-link it with the concept of climate change as a result of increased carbon emissions, and that your growing season may be modified, insects may be modified, and you may have to plan for that. Water management, that it's a precious resource and shouldn't be wasted. So when is the appropriate time to water, when is it not appropriate time to water, and how to time that. There's all kinds of science lessons that can be learned, research projects can be delved into, and when we did start this, even at the apartment, I had students participating in growing stuff in the classroom using the containers that we made. I brought some to school and letting the kids see how they can use it. They themselves engineered and devised their own out of fairly inexpensive materials and started growing in the classroom, and then took it home and continued on through the summer, with some coming back the following year, even though they were no longer students, to show me their successes as well as their failures, because it's okay in science to fail in an experiment because you can learn from the mistake. And that's the same with gardening. Is the point is to have fun, but also to learn along the way and pass on what you've learned. Incorporate research. I show the students, even though I've done gardening a lot in my life, every year I try to learn something new and try to incorporate that into my gardening practices. So I'm not ashamed or bashful using YouTube to see what others have done, hitting the books, researching on the internet, just you name it, information and the wealth of information that we have access to. Use that in a constructive, positive way, and then share that. Share what you've learned, so that next year you can try something different and maybe be a bit more successful.
I also think that with the younger kids, if you're working in schools with younger kids, depending on their experiences, some kids do not know where food comes from. Like
Correct.
When I worked with kids in more of an inner city school, they did not understand that their food grew from the dirt, and which was kind of shocking to me. But they thought it was disgusting, like they're like, miss, that's gross. Like, I'm not eating that. It came out of the dirt. And I'm like, yeah, but everything, like, talk to me about what's in your lunch right now. You're eating this. That Dorito was corn, so that was grown from the dirt, and they had no idea. They didn't know that milk came from cows. And it sounds crazy, like that. How can you not know that? But it's just not part of, something that's discussed. Adults often assume that that, so it's not discussed. And
I know as a high school teacher, a lot of the students don't understand, or starting to at least, that the importance of soil quality, and that's the other aspect that I bring in, because that's the unsung hero of any garden, is the quality of the soil. If you treat the soil correctly, you bait it, you prepare it, you enrich it with organic compost and compost from dairy farms and other areas, that you can have a more bountiful crop because of the
healthy soil.
Fertile, yeah, the very, very healthy soil. That's really the key to most any gardening, is having good soil.
Yeah.
So you were starting to talk a little bit about the value it brings from both of your different perspectives to young people and children today. Can you tell me a little bit more about how kids can value from learning about where their food comes from?
Well, it's personal accomplishment, but also long-term, lifelong. Understanding that the food, again, going back to greenhouse gas emissions, fossil fuels, burning of them, that if they grow their own produce locally, that just offsets a little bit, makes less of a demand, so that stuff grown overseas don't have to transport via ship, trains, trucks just to get to the local store when you have it in your own backyard. So you can help save the environment in your own little way, and if everyone does it, it's like the penny doubling. Eventually it will have an impact. But the kids also get a sense, and those that I've worked with, of personal pride and accomplishment when they grow something and they know they did it, they helped the plant, and when they harvest it, when they eat it, there's pride there. You can see it, and the kids are engaged.
Yeah, I think it makes a big difference. Even as an adult, like when we were at the apartment, we planted corn just a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I'm like a real farmer because we have corn, which is ridiculous. We had like 8 plants, which it's absurd, but I was an
experiment
adult
in a grow bag.
Yeah,
Still.
they wanted to see if it would work. But to me, I was like, it's cool, like we planted the potatoes in the grow bags that year, and to pull up your own potatoes, and I mean, we had different varieties, so there were like blue potatoes and red potatoes and white potatoes. It was just really cool. Like, I was an adult, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like,
No, I totally feel that.
Yeah.
When I grew some peas myself, I literally was like posting them all over Facebook, like, look what I grew, look what I did.
It's fun.
Accomplishment.
Yeah,
especially
definitely.
if you're not, accustomed to doing that kind of thing.
Right.
So in addition to the raised beds you have up here in the front, you also have a few in the back, but you
Yes.
have some birds also, right?
Yep.
Chickens, and sadly now just one duck, but the only one that laid eggs, so that's important, I suppose.
Yep. And 2 baby.
Oh, we have some bought new
Heritage.
birds. So we have more chickens we got this year, and we have 2 heritage turkeys, Kentucky bourbon red species. I've never seen them, so this is kind of fun for me, an experiment to do something different. I did want turkeys this year, so I selected those just to be different, just to have some fun.
Yeah, and the birds are really cool because I've never had them until we got them here. So it's really interesting to, be in charge of an animal that is not a dog or a cat, or it's a big difference, and it's very cool to have the different colored eggs. Like we have some that
They're fun to
blue.
watch, but
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, if you've never had a farm fresh, or let's just say a fresh egg, you don't know what you're missing. That's straight from the hen house. That day or the day next, it's just far better.
I've become like an egg snob about it, which is really weird because I'm not that way about anything, and I'll eat them. I'll eat store-bought. I eat them all winter, but I'm like, oh, I hate buying eggs in the winter because I'm like, I feel like they're freeloading at that point. Like I want my eggs, and they're not the same. The color is different, and the taste.
As you can see, we're close to the road. That's why turn this into an area where people can be slow because of the kids.
But it is much different, and I love to collect the eggs and get we have like the blue ones. There are some that are like a little bit pink and green, and
Well, the first types of birds we start off with here, where I grew up in Oklahoma, we had others, but this species specifically here, we have the Americanas and the Russian Orloff. The Russian Orloff is a cold weather bird and will lay late into the season, but also start up laying earlier than most other birds. Because this New England can be cold winters, that's kind of a boon. The Americana is the one often referred to as the Easter egg or chicken because it has multiple different colored eggs, from green to blue hues to it just all depends on which bird's laying.
the Orloff's is kind of pinky.
Yeah, it's kind of brownish pinky.
Yeah.
This year's birds we invested in the Marins, the Barred Rock, and we got a few more Americanas to help replenish the flock. Because after about 3 years, they start to dwindle in their egg production, and we're going to, even though the boys are aware and they're not too happy, Willow's not yet sure she's aware of it, but growing up as in the farm country as I did in Oklahoma, we harvested the birds, and that is the ultimate goal is once they're pretty much petered out in the eggs, we'll harvest them. So we'll have chicken that we know what's been fed, they've had a great life, and so we'll be good about that.
Yeah.
And we use some of those eggs. I think you use some to do some Easter egg dyeing. So
Yeah.
put in a lot of great depth in the color too.
Yeah,
which
because
is pretty
they
cool.
didn't have any treatment for their coating, so we noticed this year that they picked up the dye more, and really
More vivid.
rich, deep colors, which was kind of cool.
which the Marins that we got are supposed to be
Chocolate brown eggs.
brown. So
I can't wait for that.
I'm kind of curious. I've never had those before, so I'm sure the taste of the egg is going to be fine. It's just the shell color that's just different.
But it's cool. Like I think that's cool, and the kids like that. I think they're, as much as they don't particularly love the chores of feeding the chickens and watering the ducks,
getting the eggs or the duck egg.
but they do like playing with them. You know, like Aiden goes out there, and Willow and Tristan even will go out there. There's lots.
Well, Willow thinks they're all her birds.
Her birds. They owns them. They're her friends.
They're her birds.
Which
is fine.
Yeah, but they really like it. I mean, and the ducks, I feel like are cuter than the chickens, but to raise baby ducks is kind of disgusting. They're just gross. They poop everywhere.
I never raised ducks, so I had no idea that Cheri wanted to try it. And I'm like, I'm game. I'll let you try that. She's wanted to try other things, even though we have a small plot of land here. Not enough for cattle, for horses. Maybe a pig or two, maybe a goat, but even then we're not ready for that.
We'll see.
So I'm like, if you want your ducks, I'll give you that compromise.
But they are messy, and you know, they're very, very cute when they're babies, but they're very gross. So like, you know, we had to give them water. I mean, I had to wash them because they would get messed up. They'd be like, we put the ducklings in the bathtub, and then I have to clean the bathtub because it was just a mess. But it was a good experience. I'm glad we did it. I'm just not ready for new babies yet of that species.
Do you prefer the chicken egg or a duck egg?
I like the chicken eggs better.
They're fresh, either or. You can tell subtle difference, but really the biggest taste difference is between the fresh eggs versus the store-bought.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the factories, I know there's a couple large chicken factories here in Connecticut and around the states, or I should say for egg factories, and they do it as a business, and that's fine. That's what they do. But if you can, and people can easily raise your own backyard chickens, having fresh eggs is far better than having store-bought.
And it's not that hard, really.
They take care of themselves.
They
you
do.
have predators, and we have drawn this predators, but we're out in the rural area anyway, Connecticut. They're going to be there. Fisher, raccoon, possum, hawks, foxes, coyotes. They're already there. You just don't see them unless they want you to see them, or they're completely oblivious to you. If you design the chicken, coop, we have a chicken tractor, which I'm sure you'll see. A friend of mine, they had an outbuilding that I took that will be modified into a chicken coop, if you will, a permanent one. So you give them enclosures for at night, fence it in to keep out some of the four-legged critters like the foxes previously mentioned. And the birds, because we let them free-range, they can get out, fly out, and then of course they know how to fly back in. But you're going to lose a bird or two. It's part of it. To me, it's not so much of a personal issue if we lose a bird. Is it slightly annoying? Sure. It is just the way of things. And what I get frustrated most in is in this last winter we lost a bird, an Orloff. You could tell by the feather marks, imprints inside the snow that a red-tailed hawk came down, dispatched the bird, and then attempted to fly off with it, but couldn't. And so it left the bird behind. And so when I go out there to check on him, I have a dead bird out there. And to me, that bothers me. I don't mind the hawk was trying to get food for itself to survive the winter. I get it. The bird was not smart enough to stay enclosed. But at least
eat it.
Take it. But if you don't, then stop trying to kill my birds.
Any advice for someone that would want to, start growing their own garden and they have a limited space?
Look into container gardening, and I'm not saying clay pots. You can use things like that, but I have grow bags, and I don't want to necessarily plug it, but it's called a smart pot. It's a thick fabric, and it lasts for years. The ones that I already have and been using, they're easily 5-6 years old, and I've got several more I haven't even started to use. But research the size of the pot matters. You can get them 5, 10, 15 gallon. What that means is how much dirt it will hold. The larger it is, then you can get plants that need a deeper root, like the fruiting plants like tomatoes, peppers, and things like that. If you got a 5 gallon, one plant could grow in that. If you got a 15, then depending on the pattern and how you plant it, you can get multiple plants within a pot. But the next thing is if you have limited space, make sure it's a sunny spot. Make sure that the moisture that drains out of those bags, because they need to drain, that it won't necessarily rot your deck or anything like that. So you need to be careful where you place them. Even if you place them on a bare patch of earth, it might be better to put a little mulch underneath it and then place it, so that way you don't have weeds growing in and around it, because it will drain. So even with a limited space, just be thoughtful in where you place it. But yeah, you can grow anything, anywhere. You just have to target what you want, be mindful of that, and consider soil quality and depth that you're going to invest in. Obviously, organic soil is best, or a combination. Obviously, I use the chicken litter from the chicken tractor to enrich my gardens. I have compost that I've gotten from dairy farms that are fairly organic here in the state of Connecticut, as well as some horse manure compost, and I mix all that in and abate the soil so that it's rich.
And it produces more, even though if you have a smaller space, if you have good soil, you'll get a better bounty at the end of it. Plus, you could be creative in the way that you do it. Like we did a variety, and we've expanded as the years have gone by. First we just had a couple of the ones that we made out in here, and then we had the
that's for the bigger stuff. The smaller stuff like lettuces and flowers, you can use the clay pots. Like I'm sure you'll get a picture. We have what's called a salad bowl. So you have 4 or 5 different types of leafy greens growing in a fairly shallow bowl, and you just come and come and harvest every other week. The leaves have grown back, you harvest it, and you have a fresh salad.
And you can do like different things, like we did the palette with the vertical gardening.
Yeah, that's right now. It's got flowers that are seeding in it this year.
Last year we had herbs in it and lettuces and chard, and it actually worked out great. We just tried it because we saw it and we're like, that's kind of cool. Let's see what works. But because it's a large thing, but it's up, vertical, so it's not taking up as much ground space, and so you're getting more for your space out of it, and that actually worked really well. We got tons of herbs out of it.
The drawback to that one, and that's part of the experimentation of gardening, is it's recommended you lay the pallets flat once they're prepared for it, and fill it with the soil, plant the plants in it, let it grow for a week or two, and then lean them to each other, and you'll see how they're leaned to each other, and then I secured it. But once they've been growing, now they're really heavy.
Yeah.
And so to undo it, that's the drawback that I've learned from that. I'm not against vertical gardening. I think actually if you had a panel that I've seen, like a stockade fence panel, and gutters. You can use gutters to grow strawberries and literally have a wall of strawberries. That would be a much easier vertical garden per se. But just do the research on different container type gardenings, your space, lattices that you may use. I built a lattice for the peas. There's just... The options are almost up to your own imagination, and that's what's fun, is you can just have fun with what you want to do.
Great, well thank you guys. I think I want to take a quick tour of what you got going on over here now.
Okay.
I'm really excited. It's probably going to be a little bumpy. And you might have heard some of the car noise as you came by, or as they were coming by.
So basically the garden itself is, the majority of it is a circular pattern. So the beds go, around in a circle. So we have kale and basil here in these small beds. And these are our zucchini that kind of just went wild. Here we have radishes and carrots and turnips, beets.
Some didn't seed, so I'll be replanting carrots since we have a long season. Fairly long enough that's still mature.
Yeah, and then we have the pumpkins over here, which is fun, and watermelons. And I think there's actually some other types of melons in here too.
There's cantaloupe, but I think the pumpkin's going to overshadow it.
Yeah.
But see what you can get.
And those are tomato plants.
Got a couple extra space.
So we tucked it in there, and then we have the ones in the backyard. Chickens, the duck is really loud, but there's a chicken tractor so it can be moved around, but we ended up just leaving it in this space here and fencing it in. The fence is actually movable also, but we just left them in this spot so that they don't ruin all of our grass all the time. But
we've already harvested the edges now. There's 4 boxes to each side. The main part is for them to
the duck is so loud. But the babies are over here in the brooder box. So those are the babies that just came outside yesterday for the first time. but they are going to get bigger and then be able to, we're going to have the new enclosure for them to keep them separate from the bigger birds.
The deck is in the middle of a bit of rehab unto itself, but this is some of the containers that you can get. There's the clay shallow terracotta bowl to do the salad bowl. These I just got this year to get some more herbs. Here I'm just experimenting, is this enough depth for a pepper? But the rest of the simple herbs that you can use. And this area always gets a lot of sun. So this is a small batch. Perfect for small containers.